Hello, my name is Kathy Baker and I am here with Erin Birch. We are the directors of Center Operations for Mile High Early Learning. We are so glad that you have joined our organization. Today we are going to talk with you about health and safety protocols that we have put into place specifically for this COVID time. A lot of things have changed and continue to change, but we are hoping that this webinar will give you a foundation so that you know what to expect for keeping everyone safe as we do our in-person services.
So welcome, like Kathy mentioned, we're going to start with our teacher check-ins and talk just a little bit about what you will experience when you arrive to the center on your first day. So at the teacher check-in station, we ask that you have a mask on as you enter the building. If you do not have a mask available, please call your program director or to the center phone number so that somebody can bring a mask to you before you enter into the space. As you enter into the building, you will receive your temperature check. And as long as your temperature is below 100.4, you will be allowed into the building. We then ask that you wash your hands or use hand sanitizer before you continue into the building space. As you move into the building, you want to make sure that you clock in using our Paylocity system through the kiosk within your center building or using the mobile app within your phone. As you move into the classroom, please put on a smock to help protect yourself and others around you. And as you're preparing the classroom, we're going to talk a little bit more about the extra cleaning procedures later in this presentation, but did want you to know that we do have extra procedures in place to ensure the health and safety of yourself and the students within your room. Some of our classrooms have windows. If it's a possibility for them to be opened, we encourage you to do so. As we know that fresh air helps to ventilate the space. And we're also encouraging that breaks and lunches be taken outside whenever possible.
So moving on, the next step of the morning is when parents come to drop off their children. For right now, parents are being asked to stay outside of the buildings, and so this drop-off does take place outside. As a teacher, you may or may not be part of that process, but we do have one or two designated adults at a table set outside. Each center looks a little bit different. You'll notice when you get there, though, that the first thing that we do is the child health screening. So as the children are waiting in line, someone will go up and take their temperature. They will ask the adult who's bringing them if they have seen any of a number of symptoms. And then if a child does come up with a concern, we would move that person away from the line and we would contact our nurses who will give us specific advice based on the specifics of that particular situation. If the child is fine and is not exhibiting any symptoms, no one in their house is exhibiting any symptoms, they haven't been around anyone, then a teacher or a director or a floater, somebody, depending on the situation at that particular center, will take the child then directly to the room. So our preference is that one of the child's teachers is there to take them back to their room, so they go from the parent to their teacher, and we're limiting the exposures that go back and forth. Once the child is taken care of, the parent continues in line, and by the way, there are cones set up to keep them around every 6 feet apart or so. And then the parent will move forward in the line. They will sanitize their hands. They will get a clean pen from that pile and sign their child in, put the pen in the dirty pile, move over, use, if they are a CCAP family, they need to sign them in electronically, so they will move over to the iPad and sign them in and take care of that. The person at the station then will wipe off with an alcohol wipe in between each use. So we're being just very, very careful at this station. And then they will continue on outside the other end of the line so that we just kind of have this nice circle as they come in. We're asking right now that no outside items be brought in from home or go back and forth between home and school. I know that best practice talks about having transition objects and things like that. We're just not doing that right now because health and safety is our top priority. So we provide blankets, we provide food, we have materials, so they really don't need to bring those in there. And you know what? It's going very well. We're really finding that children transition really, really well without it. And so we're making it work. The only exception to that would be infants, because they sometimes have specific bottles, foods, things that are unique to that specific child. And so those things are allowed to go back and forth. But that's the only exception we've needed to make. As a teacher, if you are inside and the child had a rough drop-off for whatever reason, feel free to take a picture on your classroom iPad, go ahead and email that to the parent if they're feeling better. That would kind of help the parent to feel a little better, to know that they're, that sad child won't be the last thing that they saw of the morning and think that that's happening all day. So that's an option to help that to go more smoothly. At the end of the day, we sometimes set out tables up front. Sometimes we respond to the doorbell. Parents, while they arrive at a similar time every morning, we get everybody there between 8 and 9. Pickup can happen all throughout the afternoon, and so it's a little bit different. So either way, parents will either ring the doorbell or we will greet them outside. And if it's before the 3 o'clock snack, teachers know they can go to the kitchen and get a snack to go home with them. It might be a floater who comes to get the child. It might be a director. But once they ring the doorbell, somebody will answer, and each center has their own system, get that child, and then we will bring them to the front with the parent. If it can be one of the teachers, and then that gives you at least a few minutes to talk about the child's day and to kind of connect with that parent. We're trying to do that as much as we can. We really do want to build strong relationships with families, even though they cannot come in the center. And so it's been challenging, but we're figuring out ways to do that. And really, communication is key. And just so you know, children also have a 3 p.m. temperature check. So they're checked first thing in the morning. They're also checked at 3. We're just monitoring for symptoms twice a day to, again, make sure everyone is staying healthy.
Hey, let's talk a little bit about masks. So adults are required to wear masks at all times within our centers. And the only exception to this is if you happen to be in a space alone, that you can close a door, you could take your mask off, but as soon as somebody enters into that space, you need to put your mask back on. Wearing your mask correctly is very important. And so that means that it needs to be covering both your mouth and your nose when you are wearing your mask within our centers. Children also have the option of wearing a mask if they are over the age of 3. If a child is under the age of 3, they may not wear a mask. That is actually a regulation from the state in the Office of Early Childhood. So we're going to encourage children, if they are over the age of 3, to wear a mask. It might be a mask supplied by the parent, or Mile High also has child-sized masks that we can provide to children who need them. We are going to work with the child to hopefully keep their mask on throughout the day. But if the child is messing with the mask, they're touching it, they take it on and off, then we will at some point not continue to encourage the child to wear the mask, as we want to still make sure that we're providing educational activities throughout the day and that our only focus is not on the masks. We're asking staff to please monitor when children are wearing masks, that their breathing is still okay, that they're not touching it as often as possible, and also that it's not being touched by other children. And children should not wear masks during mealtime, and also never during nap time.
So meals have changed for Mile High once we had the new protocol for COVID, whereas our curriculum traditionally has self-serve meals, we call them family style meals, we had to suspend that for this time. So we did receive some waivers from our food program, which is the CACFP, and we have a lot more flexibility in serving meals and things, and so this is what it now looks like. We have breakfast between 9 and 9:30. That may have actually changed. Just check with your director when that comes in, but it does often just come first thing in the morning. I think now it's more between 8 and 9. The meals used to have to be at a table and the child is coming to a full set of the food items. Now we have a lot more flexibility. It doesn't have to be at the table. They could take it throughout the room, so you could really separate the children significantly. Or you could have it outside. You could have a picnic. You could do it on the floor. So we have a lot more flexibility, which is wonderful. We have some pre-prepared menu items, and then you'll notice some we've now that it's fall moved to some that are in a pan, but it is all pre-plated for the children. So the children should receive a plate of their food. We do sit them as far apart as we can. Doesn't have to be 6 feet, but that's always the goal. What I've noticed is, whereas we have tables that are kind of individual size and we put them together for our meals, whereas we used to have one child at every table, right now we seem to have one kind of diagonally across from each other and every other seat is filled. You have the flexibility to serve it in a rolling manner, so you might have half the children eat first and then they move away and another half comes in. They could be across the room from one another. What we do still have consistent is that we do ask for one teacher to sit nearby. We want to, monitor for health and safety. Every once in a while, a child does start to choke. We want to make sure that children are, using the food appropriately and, in a positive way. We want to spur conversation. We want this to be a positive point of the day, and usually children are very excited to have the meal time, and they get very talkative often. And it's a very pleasant part of the day when we want to keep that. We, because of the CACFP, are required to record that the child did eat the meal. So we have a child supervision roster, or CSR, that we use throughout the day to monitor attendance. That stays in the classroom. So that is the form that we're going to ask you, one of the teachers in the room anyway, to record. If it's breakfast, write a B. If it's 12 o'clock, if it's 8:30 and they're having breakfast, write a B at the 8:30 mark. If it's 12 o'clock, they're having lunch, write an L, etc. But if it's recorded inside the classroom during the day, it will then be moved to the actual attendance sheet at the end of the day, and then everybody's happy with all of the monitoring and documentation. The other thing that we did have to change was toothbrushing, and we were very sad to have to give this up because it was another thing Head Start asked us to teach the children to do twice a day at school, but we are not doing toothbrushing at all at this time, just because of the potential contamination from one child to another. Hopefully we can add that back when things get better.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about the extra cleaning procedures that we have in place currently. So we are asking teachers and working with teaching teams to make sure that we have fewer materials within our classrooms, and really making sure that we're looking at items that can be easily cleaned. So when you think about items that you're setting out within your space, really where the item, does it have a lot of small crevices? Is it porous? Is it something that's going to keep germs on it and pass them on to other children as they're playing? If so, that might be a material that we put away for a little bit of time and bring back out as we move forward, and hopefully as we get into a safer space within our classrooms. Looking at the shelving and the center spaces that we have available, making sure that we have more space for children to play in, and also potentially wider pathways within our classrooms so that children do not have to walk right next to each other as they're moving about the space. Currently, we do not have group sensory tables or activities within our classrooms, unfortunately. but what we can have are individual sensory buckets. And so making sure that you're working with your program director or assistant director on what that might look like within your specific classroom. Also, we're working to create different sets of materials that can be rotated throughout the day. So you might have a material set A that comes out in the morning, and around lunchtime, the material set A is then put away after it's sanitized and cleaned. And then material set B is taken out for the afternoon, and you know that that has already been cleaned and sanitized from the previous day. As you're working throughout your classroom, it would be beneficial to have one teacher who might be that designated health and safety person. So really making sure that somebody within your classroom is keeping an eye on the materials, and if a child happens to put something in their mouth during center time, that teacher can catch that and remove that material from the classroom so that it doesn't continue to pass on germs to other children. Throughout the day, we are sanitizing high-touch areas quite often, and sanitizing toys and materials as well, depending on your schedule and the number of staff in your classroom. At the end of the day, we're going to ask that you disinfect all of the toys, materials, anything that can be disinfected within your classroom, and really understanding the difference between sanitizing and disinfecting. So sanitizing is using a slightly lower bleach and water solution, and disinfecting is using a higher solution. So really making sure that we're not using that disinfectant throughout the day to disinfect toys, but certainly continuing to use that in the case of diapering and or body fluids.
So it's encouraged to spend we have been encouraged to spend as much time as possible outside. It is a healthier environment to be in, so as long as weather permits, we will extend our times outside. We do have to use pods of children. I mean, you've heard that word. Whatever is in one classroom, they may use the outdoor space at one time, and then we do disinfect in between times and have around 10 minutes for it to dry. We have a particular device to do that. That's pretty helpful, but just keep that in mind that spend as long as you can, whatever your schedule allows to be outside. Please do lead activities, or at least extend the learning of the children if they are choosing their own activities. It's a time where you're definitely still on as a teacher, and you should be having appropriate supervision, etc., and monitoring and interacting with the children. It really is a precious part of the day for you to continue to build those relationships, but again, in a healthier environment as much as possible. And like I said earlier, you really can eat a snack outside, whether it is one of the actual meals, breakfast, lunch, or snack, or whether it is something extra that is worked into the curriculum for the day. We can really use the outdoor space for those as well.
Right. At Mile High, we do have therapists and coaches, some of which who are from outside providers that provide many different supports, not only for the agency, but for centers and teaching staff. So we're going to take just a minute and go through some of them here to give you an understanding of which personnel are currently allowed within our buildings, and which personnel we're working toward allowing within our spaces. So the mental health consultants of Denver and our Clayton providers are not currently coming within our buildings, but may be meeting parents outside of our building spaces to start doing some kind of in-person work with parents and or teaching staff, if you will, but outside of our building space. Therapies of the Rockies and CCPLD currently are not coming within our buildings and have not started to do services outside at this time, but we're hoping that we may be able to work toward them returning sometime this fall. Swallow Hill is a very fun music program that we partner with. And at this time, unfortunately, they are not coming within our buildings, but we're in conversation about hopefully being able to allow them back at some point this school year. Our school therapists serve many of our children that are currently on IEPs. And while they're not currently entering our building, we are working on a plan for them to be able to provide services to children on IEPs, potentially outside during a very kind of specialized time. Our own individual education coaches who are employed through Mile High are allowed into our buildings at this time, but are not maneuvering through classrooms. So they have been using camcorders to do observations in classrooms, and or we do have some classroom spaces that have large enough windows and or half walls that the coaches can do observations from without or outside of that space. We are working with everything that we can to continue to do and hold meetings virtually when possible.
So nap time. Licensing would prefer that these mats be 6 feet apart whenever possible. Some classrooms are able to accommodate that. Others struggle a little bit. So the absolute minimum is 2 feet apart. That's always been a licensing reg, and they really prefer 3, even in normal circumstances. So really do at least shoot for the 3, and then have extra space between as much as you can, and or barriers between mats. Like, for example, a child is sleeping pretty close to a shelf, and then there's another child on the other side of the shelf, and that really does help to prevent the air from circulating as closely together for those 2 children. So furnitures can be appropriate barriers. You can also alternate, so this child's head is here and feet here, and the next child is the other way around. And again, so their breathing is a little bit farther apart, which just allows them a little extra measure of safety. And then just we wanted to add in this presentation to remind people that any child who doesn't fall asleep within a good 15 minutes or so, especially 30 minutes, if they are still on their mat after 30 minutes and you're not actively still working with them to try to get them to sleep, then please allow them to get up, and they should be able to be offered some quiet activities to do in a different part of the room off of their mat. If children are sleeping, it's one of those really good days, and that's a really good time to do some of that extra cleaning Erin was talking about. You can choose one section of the classroom to clean, maybe take everything off this particular area's shelves and put everything back. Or maybe you are rotating group A and group B of materials, as we referred to before, and rotating those things around. So nap time is a really valuable time for you to be doing one of those others. Just keep cleaning in mind. We serve the child's needs first, and then we go to the environment.
So let's take a look at our plan for illness. For staff, if you have any signs of illness or any symptoms, we ask that you contact your program director as soon as possible, and hopefully before you even attempt to come into your center that day. It's likely that anyone with symptoms will be asked to stay home. But again, like Kathy has mentioned previously in this presentation, we are going to reach out to our nurse consultant to provide the information from the staff member and get guidance on how to move forward for that specific day. If you happen to come to work and you're feeling fine and you have no symptoms or no fever, and you develop symptoms during the day, you will be asked to go home, and certainly you should let your director know as you're doing so that she can contact the nurse again. And we'll ask you to contact your primary doctor to get further guidance from your primary care physician. In addition to that, we're also going to ask that you reach out to human resources if you have any questions about the sick pay and or that you were asked to leave due to exhibiting symptoms, and they will be able to support you with your pay questions. Human resources will also ensure that any staff are notified of a positive case within your center, and or if you happen to be a traveling staff that were at multiple centers, this is how you will be notified of that information. And then looking at children and families, we talked a little bit about that each child must pass a health screen before coming inside the building. So if a child is in the building and becomes ill during the day, as the teacher, you're going to call admin for support, and they will contact the nurses again to get guidance on how to move forward. Please make sure that the child is comfortable within your classroom. We really are asking that you keep the child within your classroom and not take them out of the classroom space into the hallway where they could potentially be exposing more staff and more children to whatever the sickness or illness is that they have. So within your classroom, if you have a cozy corner or an area in the library that makes children feel comfortable, please work with the child to stay within your space and make them as comfortable as possible. At that point, when a child becomes ill, we are asking that parents pick their child up within 1 hour of the phone call to the parents. And parents have been notified of this information.
So in order to make all of these new practices and these policies happen, parents do an orientation. They do it outside. Usually we have tables set up pretty close to our entrance, and our family community advocates or directors will meet with parents and they will go over all of these guidelines, and they sign off that they understand and that they're okay with all of these before the child ever even walks through the doors. They will fill out a new emergency contact situation or form, and then you should receive a copy of that in your classroom. It lets you know just on one short form, who the main contacts are for the family, who's allowed to pick up that child, and if they have any allergies or things, that's one of the ways that you get notified of that. If they have any health conditions, all of that should be kind of highlighted on there. So what was new was that, we're asking parents to limit how many people pick up and drop off so that we are again limiting possible exposures, that it will stay outside, that there will be health screenings, that everything they need to do to sign the child in and out, both on paper and electronically, will be outside, that we will have all of these materials that we will keep sanitized throughout the day. Please don't bring things from home. Don't expect things to go back and forth. We used to have parents that want to bring their own child's sheets and blankets and they would wash them, and we're just not doing any of that right now. And then they know to pick up at the end of the day by just going to the front door, and they are alerted that if, like Erin just said, if their child develops symptoms during the day, or if there's an exposure during the day, we find out somebody else was sick or etc., we will be notifying them. And if their child is sick, we do ask that they get picked up within the hour. Last thing, if symptoms are present, then the nurses will let them know when what has to happen for the child to be cleared to return to the classroom. So it's pretty regulated, and we're doing this for the best practice health and safety for all of the people in the room, so both the children and the adults.
So as we continue to look at our health and safety practices, technology considerations have come into play as well. So all staff should continue to be prepared to meet virtually, either through Zoom or on Teams. We used to do staff meetings, team meetings, and collaboration meetings in person, but those have also shifted to virtual meetings and will continue to be virtual for the time being and really for the unforeseen future. Staff who need technology equipment, please make sure that you communicate that with your supervisor and to see what is available for you as a staff member within Mile High.
So we just wanted to end by reminding you the only way to make sense out of change is to plunge into it, move with it, and join the dance. And you know, it really has felt like a dance. There have been so many things that have changed, and we just keep adapting. And you know, we've had a pretty solid track record of keeping people healthy, and we will continue to work to make that happen. Please continue to stay flexible as things change and go, but wait a minute, I thought it was such and such. And we'll let you know, yes, but actually now, you know, policies changed, and we will continue to follow guidance of the CDC, Office of Early Childhood, licensing overall, Head Start, all of that. So as we blend those things and as things change, we will let you know. But just know we have your very best health in mind, and we will do what we can to keep you safe.
Thank you so much for joining us today. If you have any additional questions about today's presentation, please don't hesitate to reach out to Kathy and myself, of course, but also your program director and assistant director on site. We'll be more than happy to help you. And they will also have more specific details about the center that you're working at and some of the things that have changed and grown and we've adapted to as time continues to move on. Again, thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
Bye.